Okay, so let's bring ourselves back to circle creation or creating sacred space. We've already touched on this to some degree. We've had a look at the lesser vanishing ritual of the pentagram, the star ruby, and the sort of equivalent in what I was taught from a Kabbalistic point of view. So what I want to talk about today is the method you use in traditional witchcraft. Now, when I say traditional witchcraft, I'm talking about British traditional witchcraft. I believe it's now called modern traditional witchcraft. This is the type of it's very much a reconstructionist type of tradition in many regards, but it goes back to trying to bring back the practices of the ancestors, as from a reconstructionist point of view. But when it comes to actually creating sacred space, you don't actually technically create sacred space in a traditional witchcraft format, because usually you work on the land itself, outside, and the land is considered to already be sacred, so you don't really need to make it sacred when it's already sacred. If you're working inside, you can create sacred space, just to, well, it's still on the land. I mean, you're inside a building. Just because you're inside a building doesn't mean it's not on the land, but in certain circumstances you can create sacred space. But as I say, generally the land is considered sacred, so you don't technically create sacred space. And when it comes to it's mostly called compass round. You have the compass with the cardinal points, and it's round. Therefore, it's called the compass round. Quite simple, really. But when it comes to doing the compass round and performing any kind of ritual which creates that microcosm, that space you're going to be working in, there's probably as many methods to doing it as there are traditional witches. So to try and button down an actual format like you would do with the less vanishing ritual of the pentagram, or with a Wiccan circle, which I'll talk about in the next video, which has sort of a prescribed method to it. It's very difficult when it comes to the traditional witchcraft format. So I'm just going to sort of run through some of the symbolism and some of the general sort of ways to actually do it. But obviously, because it's so different for everybody, I encourage you to go and explore some options online. I'll give you some names of authors which are very good, I consider to be very good in this arena, so you can go check out their work, and maybe if you're interested, then you can create your own method of laying the compass round. One of the people that I do suggest is Artisan. Go and check out his books, his websites, his blogs. Some very, very interesting and informative stuff there. Now, the compass round itself is actually based very much on the mythical lands. You don't actually create a space where you are protected, but I'll get to that in a second. So each quarter on the compass is a gate, so it's a gate to a mythical land. But whereas some will just work within a circle, and to say casting a circle to a traditional witch is a bit of an insult, so don't say that. Just use terms like compass round, laying the compass, things like that. Yeah, some people work within just the circle that they create. But if you go into the works of, for instance, Evan John Jones, he was a former magister of the clan of Tubal Cain, before Robert Cochrane, or also known as Roy Bowers. So go and check out their work as well, especially Robert Cochrane. From a traditional witchcraft point of view, probably one of the leading people in that space. But with Evan John Jones' work, quite often what you'll find is in the Western Gate, he actually creates two circles basically. So you have your circle that you enter from the mundane world, and then you create a bridge across the River of Time, which is in the western side, and then there's a circle there with a labyrinth. So the whole process is that you enter your space from the mundane world. You then have a bridge, which is usually created by sword and broom, and then you cross over the bridge, over the River of Time, and this is obviously significant with the process of death. So you're moving into you're moving into the underworld where the dead go. There's only a certain point you can go to though. So you can go to the Rose Castle, which is in the west, but you can't move into the Spiral Castle, because then you would be dying. And you're not actually dying, you're just moving into that space temporarily and then coming back again. So that would be one format. And then you can, if you go into R.J. Stewart's work, which is very much based in the fairy tradition. So the four gates actually extend out, and the mythical lands, into the mythical lands of the Tuatha De Danann. So in most cases, the compass round actually extends into the fairy realm, into the land of Alfheim. And also what you'll find with traditional witchcraft and the laying of the compass are terms such as treading the mill or ploughing the bloody field. Now, this is a method of putting the participants into a trance, but you'd have to go, and I'm not going to discuss how you do it specifically now, but I mean basically you actually move in a circle, and for instance, treading the bloody mill is treading the mill is almost like pushing a rock uphill. So you imagine that the circle is actually a mill, and everybody has a handle, and they're pushing the handle to turn the mill. If you are doing ploughing the bloody field, what you do is you drag one of your feet around the circle, and this creates like a gouge in the earth. It doesn't physically create it, but you can imagine your foot getting deeper and deeper into the earth, and obviously it starts to bleed. But it's imaginary. Your foot's not actually bleeding. Your foot's not actually sinking into the ground. But just imagine it. So as you keep going, it gets harder and harder and harder, and you just keep pushing yourself more and more. You carry on, and when you feel like you can't do it anymore, you just carry on more, and it actually puts you into a trance state, and it creates a vortex between this world and the next. Sorry. Between this world and the underworld, and once you get to that trance state, then you collapse and you actually move into the underworld. Now, when it comes to standard tools, I mean, there's a lot of them, but I mean, your basic type of tools would be your athame, or your dagger, your ritual dagger, a cauldron. The stang is extremely important, and the besom. In some traditions, they also use a sword. Some may use the skull and crossbones, or the crossed arrows in the skull on the stang itself. The stang actually is the altar. It represents the horn god, and it usually gets moved around different positions depending on what time of year it is. It can often go into the northern gate, which is often considered the entrance into the other world. So there's a lot of representation that goes into the stang, and a lot of ways it's used. But as I say, it's considered to be the altar itself, so it usually gets dressed and representative of the gate, the gateway, and of the horn god, and things like that. The besom is also a very interesting tool. Now, in a lot of cases, to enter and exit the compass round, you actually use the besom, and it's actually representative of the womb, the birth canal, and the vagina. So the brush end is representative of the vagina, and where you have the actual circle, the space that you're going to be working in, you place the besom across. So the handle is across the line of the circle, and the brush end is out. So you've got womb, birth canal, and vagina. And then what people do, what the participants do, is they dance over the handle of the brush into the space, or the handle of the besom into the space, and then when they exit, then they walk down out of the circle. So it's kind of like entering back into the womb of the mother, and then exiting out of the womb and being born back into the mundane world. So as I say, there's no real aspect here. So that you possibly find within ceremonial magic, Wicca, and traditions like that. And there's a very good reason. If you look at a ceremonial space, whether it is some kind of Golden Dawn format, Thelema, Wicca, any kind of circle creation, or sacred space creation, which is ceremonial in nature, you are working. You're creating a space where you're going to work in. This becomes your universe. It becomes your microcosm. And you work within that space, and you pull in whatever energies you need. So you may pull in angels, you may pull in demons, you may, whatever energies you actually need to work with, you then invoke or evoke into the circle, and you work with those energies, and then you release them. Now, with the traditional craft compass round, what you're doing is you're actually moving from this space into a foreign land. So you're not bringing the spirits into your land, you're actually entering into their land. And because of this, if you go with some protective armor or protective space around you and you move into their space, then it can be considered quite disrespectful, actually. I mean, you're an intruder and a trespasser in their land. If you meet Puck, for instance, you go knock on the door of the Hobthrust Lodge, and the god comes and answers, and you've got an army of bodyguards around you. He's not going to trust you because you don't trust him. So there's a trust issue that happens, and because you're in their space, you need to go into that space with respect, and calling on a whole crowd of protective elements and energies and stuff, just immediately just says that you don't trust the energies and the entities and the deities that you're going to meet in their space. This is the main reason why you don't actually create a circle which is protective in nature. And when I say protective, it's not necessarily protective even in ceremonial magic. It's just a space that you can keep any energies out and pull in the ones that you want to use, because if you have all the energies coming in at once, you get bombarded, it becomes chaotic. A lot of them you don't want to work with, you don't need to work with, so you basically just pull in the energies that you need to work with and keep the rest out. That's what we mean by protective space, actually. Mostly. Okay, so referring to the mythical lands and the four directions of the compass. In the east, we have the rising sun. This is where the sun comes up in the morning. It's the dawning of the day. So it's the beginning or the birth of a new day. It's springtime, so it's the beginning of the birth of the new cycle of the year. So this is where you find the young Puck. And this is where he comes and he meets the Corn Maiden. He's the bringer of light, and she is the mother of the cunning fire. So, because it's the blazing sun, the rising sun, not the blazing sun, sorry, the rising sun, this is the place of fire, and it's red, so you'll see a difference between the elements and the elements in the compass round and the elements in those ceremonial traditions. But we don't, as I say, we don't necessarily work with the elements. They do appear, they do feature, but it's mostly about working with the mythical lands in those areas and those spaces. But this is fire. This is red. It's the blazing heat of the fire and the sun coming up in the morning. Then in the north, as mentioned previously, I'm in the southern hemisphere, so the sun moves in a different direction. If you're in the northern hemisphere, you would then go from east to south. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you would go from east to north. That's the direction of the sun, the path of the sun. So I would move to the north position. Now, if you're in the northern hemisphere, you move to the southern position, and it's this representation. So in this position, it's then Earth, and it's represented by the mother of the green gown. The mother of the green gown and the horn god as her consort. And they're frolicking in the fields, and it's midsummer. It's that time of year where everything's come back to life, and it's symbolic of fertility and things like that. And in this space, this is the position, the hottest time of the year, when the sun is at its apex. So this is white. It's the white heat of the day. And obviously midday if you're working with the cycle during the daytime rather than the year. So it's midday. It's midsummer. It's middle age. But this is when the flowers are blooming and the grass has grown, and the mother of the green gown and the horn god frolicking in the fields. So that's the north, or as I say, the southern position, depending on what hemisphere you're in. And then you move around to the west. This is water. As I say, I've said before, the west is usually always water. It's the watery divide. Even if you go into Carlos Castaneda's works that don't work with circles and sacred spaces, there's mention of walking through a watery veil to go from this world into an alternate reality. So you actually walk through a watery veil, and you walk into the west at twilight. Twilight? Is it twilight? When the sun's going down. So in the west is the vixen and the boatman. Now in some traditions you'll probably find the king of the Mound. And the Mound is it's kind of a gateway between this world and the land of Alfheim, or the world of the little people, the white folk. So this becomes a passage into the land of the dead, and you cross the river of time, and you go into the rose castle of the goddess. It's the dusk of the day. It's autumn time, and it's representative of old age. And in this area is actually grey. So from there you would move from the Rose Castle of the Dead to the Spiral Castle of the Hag in the south. South for me, the north if you're working in the northern hemisphere. And this is where we find the dead become the ancestors. So they've moved from middle age, which is the midsummer or midday, round to autumn, which is dusk time, when the sun's going down, and they've gone from old age and they've died, and then they move round into the Spiral Castle where they become the ancestors. And this is the final part of the actual journey, before they actually then rebirth back in the east. So the ancestors then continue through the Spiral Castle back into the east, where they get reborn, and the day gets reborn, the year gets reborn, and the old king becomes the young prince again. He becomes the young Puck, and the hag or the dark goddess of the Dark Knight becomes the young goddess again. But this is also this is the position of the Dark Goddess of the Dark Knight. It's the Dark Cauldron where death and rebirth happens. So you see the whole cycle of the year, of the day, of the age, and you know the actual mythical lands that you would be moving into. So I mean that's basically the compass round itself. As I said, there's a lot that can be discovered with traditional witchcraft, the compass round, ploughing the bloody fields, training the mill. But some people that I would suggest looking into would be Robin Artisan. R.J. Stewart's very interesting. Robert Cochrane, also known as, aka Roy Bowers. Evan John Jones. I'd also have a look at Nigel Pennick. Nigel Jackson, also very good. So there's a lot of very good authors out there, and obviously if you start researching those authors, they'll probably suggest some other authors that you can also look into. But that's where I would definitely start. And yeah, that's it for this video then. I don't want to go. The compass round differs from person to person. To try and button down an exact format is practically impossible. So what you probably do is find somebody that you feel comfortable with, and then you can obviously work with their system. And then as time goes on, once you've got used to the system, you understand how it works, then you can obviously develop it further or develop it into your own system. But definitely try and get a format just begin with, just so you become familiar with how the mythical lands work, how moving into the mythical lands work, you know, the practices itself, the representations, why you move around the space. You know, just get used to it, and then you can start developing your own path, your own tradition, and then your own way of doing things. And that's it for this video. So I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and cheers.